Hey guys, Sam here from DLife HD, and today I'm going to be covering the recent port of Shantae, originally for the Game Boy Color, now brought to Switch. Let's get right into it.
I was a worker, had to upgrade to a boss. Used to live in the hood, but had to upgrade to a loft.
Now, this game, like I said, was originally released for the Game Boy Color in 2002, and it was recently brought to the Switch by Limited Run Games in tandem with Modern Vintage Gamer. Modern Vintage Gamer actually put out a great video covering just how he brought the game to the Switch, and we'll link it down in the description below so you can go check that out. But in the meantime, let's get to the review. Now, there have been some updates to the game, just a few to make it feel a little more modern. For one, there's now a menu that lets you access all of the different modes, and it's made to feel very in line with the other menus of the recent Shantae games. You can also access the game's original Game Boy Color mode, as well as the Game Boy Advance mode, which adds additional features and a more broadened color palette. There are also a couple of filters added so that you can have full screen, an original, size, or a special mode that gives it a look of a Game Boy Color screen by splitting up each pixel individually. There's also some artwork included, which includes concept art as well as key artwork for the game. Aside from that, not a lot of changes. The game is just presented in a very basic and simple form, but it runs exceptionally well, and that's all that matters. You can play the game perfectly. So it's a good port job in my opinion. Now, talking about the game itself, the graphics are amazing. Not by today's standards, of course, but for a Game Boy Color game, WayForward really pushed the bar for what was possible. And this isn't surprising considering that this was one of the last games released on the Game Boy Color. In fact, only about 25,000 copies sold because this game was released after the Game Boy Advance had already come out. But needless to say, despite it releasing on hardware that was outdated at the time, it still managed to impress critics because it is beautiful. It features incredible techniques such as lighting that seems to change with day and night cycles or when you enter a building, as well as beautiful animations, well-rendered pixel art, and some pretty cool parallax effects between the background and the foreground. You're not going to regret anything from a visual standpoint going into this game, and it is just about the best you can get out of an 8-bit game. Now, the sound design is also incredible. The music is done by Jake Kaufman, now famous for his soundtrack in Shovel Knight. Sorry, that was hard to get out. He is extremely talented, and his work is even amazing here with the limited hardware of the Game Boy Color. The music honestly sticks with me to this day, and if you've played any of the later Shantae games, I'm sure you'll appreciate hearing some of this familiar tunes rendered in 8-bit. Now, the sound effects can be a little bit grating, so I will say the music outshines the sound effects, but it's what you'd expect from a game on the Game Boy Color. Not much you can do about that. The story is pretty simple. Definitely not the main attraction, but it is better than most games would be at that time. The main story is that a pirate named Risky Boots attacks Sequinland, and Shantae, a half-genie protector of Sequinland, sets out to protect Sequinland from Risky Boots. And after discovering that Risky Boots is gathering some ancient relics to create a steam-powered weapon, Shantae is out in a race to collect the relics before Risky Boots. And so you'll play as Shantae, seeking to collect the 4 relics. Now, Shantae is a half-genie, a mix of a genie and a human, and so another part of the story is Shantae learning more about her past, as she discovers and tries to meet her lost genie mother. Now, you might see it as a downside that the story is pretty simple, but it is witty and well written, very charming, and definitely a sign of good things to come in the future with the series, which good things did come of it. Another upside is that if you are playing it in English, the game was made in America, And so there's no poor translation that was very common at the time with Japanese games coming over to the English market. Now let's get into gameplay. This is primarily a platformer, not much in the veins of Mario, but more similar to that of Zelda 2, Castlevania 2, or Metroid. You're going to find elements of all those games in this one as you platform through the overworld, backtracking and collecting power-ups, finding new resources, heart containers, warp points, etc. Along the way, you'll find dungeons, 4, along with the final dungeon, which you will go into and solve side-scrolling puzzles. Very, very similar puzzle design to the dungeons of Zelda, but in a 2D setting. There's also a very fun dancing mechanic on this game that allows you to input different button inputs and transform into animals, which can expand your moveset. For instance, the first transformation you unlock, spoilers, is a monkey, which allows you to jump very high and cling to walls. So when you're in a dungeon, you'll generally explore, do what you can, find keys, make your way through, and then find a transformation that allows you to get up to where you couldn't get before. Very, very fun system. Once you exit and get back to the overworld, those transformations will unlock new areas for you to explore, and you'll be able to go back and collect power-ups that were previously inaccessible. Now, if you are not privy to playing old games, I will warn you this might be a little bit difficult. The game has a pretty sharp difficulty spike halfway through, and enemies hit really hard. And when night falls in Sequin Land, the enemies hit twice as hard, and pickups are not very frequent. The in-game currency is rare, and items are very expensive. And in addition to all this, there's no map. And so, if you've played a game like Metroid 2 on the Game Boy, it's going to be a very similar experience. You're going to be wandering around with no map, having to make a mental map or use a guide online. Now, I never found this to be a problem in my own playthrough, but it can be definitely a problem for some people who need a map to be able to make their way through the land. Fortunately, it being a side-scroller, it's not too hard to make your way through. As long as you keep heading right or left in one direction, you'll get where you need to go. But it still can be a little bit tricky when you're in the dungeons. Now, that's about all I have to say about the game itself as far as reviewing it goes. Now I want to tell you why I think this release matters on the Switch. So yes, this is a very old game, so what does it matter that it's coming out now? Well, first of all, as far as I'm concerned, I think this is the first Game Boy Color game to release on the Switch. Now we've seen a couple of Game Boy games released in the past on the Switch, quite a few from Square Enix especially, but this is the first Game Boy Color game. And the Game Boy Color is a very, very nice system with a relatively small library, but some strong titles that need to be represented on modern hardware. This is also a very rare game. Like I said, it came out at the time of the Game Boy Advance, and so only a few copies were put out there into the wild. And so most people haven't had a chance to play this game. If you have, you've probably played it on the 3DS, where it was available on the Virtual Console. However, the Game Boy Advance exclusive features that were included with the original release were not available in the 3DS port. So this is going to be the first time many people are able to access the full game. So it's definitely a very, very good thing to release. In addition to that, it is a solid port. Flawless as far as I'm concerned. I have played it, and played it, and played it, and I haven't run into any issues. And that is very tricky to do with ports, especially when you're emulating. It can be very tricky not to run into issues, especially considering that this game pushed the limits of the hardware it was on and required a special cartridge. And so I expected there to be difficulty in porting it, but no, it came over very, very well, and I'm impressed. Another important thing that this represents is the first console on which every Shantae game is available. You can get the first one, you can get Risky's Revenge, which was originally released on the DSi. You can get Shantae and the Pirate's Curse, which was originally released on the 3DS and Wii U. You can get Shantae Half Genie Hero, which was released on most of the platforms a little while back, PS4, Xbox One, and Nintendo Switch and Wii U. And you can get Shantae and the Seven Sirens, which was released for Apple Arcade and then released on Switch very soon after. I think it was released on the other consoles, but don't quote me on that, because I don't usually just play on Nintendo since that's where it started. But this is just amazing to be able to have all these games in one place, and even Nintendo themselves recognize that on their official YouTube channel and Twitter and all that. They said this is the first place you can play all the Shantae games, which is just so cool. This is an extremely important game to the indie scene, one of the first indie darlings Nintendo ever saw. And if you haven't played it yet, you are missing out on a great game. Sure, there are a couple of things that make it not quite as smooth an experience as games today, but I think you won't regret playing this one. Definitely give it a shot. And if you enjoy it, why don't you drop us a comment and let us know if you're having a good time with it. Definitely would love to talk to you about it. And if you're stuck on any puzzles or anything, I'd love to help you. So anyway, y'all, thanks for watching the video. Just remember to like the video on your way out. Give us a subscribe if you haven't already for more content like this on video games all the time. And be sure and hit up our Twitter for gameplay of the latest releases. And if you want to keep the conversation going with us, you can always join our Discord. We'll put a link in the description. And make sure and go check out that Modern Vintage Gamer video. It is very cool. You won't regret watching the process behind the port. Anyway, guys, with that, this video's a wrap. See you later. Peace.